This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Hazel Newlevant. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek, and on this episode, I talk with Hazel Newlevant. They are the editor of the recently published Comics for Choice, Illustrated Abortion Stories, Histories, and Politics. But before we get to that conversation, I want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the good folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are anywhere from 20 to 35% off the cover price, and every single month you're going to find some incredible specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off of the cover price, sometimes 50% off cover, but every now and again you can find discounts that are even more impressive than that. And if you go to dcbservice.com right now, you'll find a whole slew of specials, including great prices on bundled comics. It's one of the best ways of getting your favorite titles and at incredible discounts. You can find a variety of bundles from publishers such as DC, Marvel, Valiant, and in most cases, those bundled comics will be 50% off of what you'd pay for the titles individually. It just goes to show that you can't beat the prices at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your titles there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you. Hazel Newlevant is an artist and editor known for their graphic novella Sugartown, which they call a queer poly rom-com, as well as Tenderhearted, winner of the 2017 Ignatz Award for Outstanding Minicomic. I first encountered Hazel's work in Chainmail Bikini, an anthology of comics by and about women gamers released in 2016, and for which Hazel served as editor. Earlier this year, they have had two other collections where they've served as co-editor. Puerto Rico Strong, released in March by Lion Forge, and Comics for Choice, an anthology of comics about abortion and reproductive rights published by Alternative Comics. During this interview, I talk with Hazel primarily about Comics for Choice, but we discuss some of their other works as well, including their many efforts as an editor within the comics industry. This is an insightful conversation, and let's listen to that now. I have the pleasure of talking with Hazel Newlevant. They are one of the co-editors of Comics for Choice, Illustrated Abortion Stories, History, and Politics, which came out earlier this year from Alternative Comics. Hazel, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. I'm extremely pleased to be here. Thanks for having me on to talk about Comics for Choice.
Yes, and I'm glad that we're having this opportunity to talk because I remember meeting you a couple of years ago, or almost 2 years ago, at Small Press Expo. This was not that long after your other anthology, Chainmail Bikini, had come out, and I had recently reviewed it for an earlier episode of the podcast. We spoke, and then now you have this new anthology that is out, giving us the opportunity to have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm happy to loop back around. I think that Chainmail Bikini and Comics for Choice have a lot of, spiritual similarities in terms of why I wanted to do them. And it's cool to have the opportunity to edit multiple anthologies.
Right, and on that topic, just recently, Puerto Rico Strong has come out, and you're one of the co-editors of that one as well.
So, Puerto Rico Strong, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to help edit that as part of my day job as an associate editor at Lion Forge Comics, which was really nice to have that institutional support rather than having to crowdfund the anthology and all of that stuff. And, I sort of put it in a separate category from Chainmail Bikini and Comics for Choice because this one wasn't my idea. It was Marco Lopez's idea, and then he brought it to Lion Forge. But I worked with some other editors to sort of apply my anthology editing experience and help them wrangle contributors and organize everything while other editors were providing the perspective about what kind of stories about Puerto Rican history and culture that they wanted to see.
Now, I know you've done some of your own comics, but I came to you through your work in editing anthologies. Is this an area within comics that you feel very comfortable? Do you see yourself, in other words, doing more anthologies over the next few years?
That's so interesting that's how you came to my work, because that's a big part of the reason that I do anthologies is that, it's a great way for artists and writers who maybe are starting out or don't have enough, they don't have enough content to otherwise make a whole graphic novel that then can get into bookstores and all these avenues of distribution. So that's a big part of why I did Chainmail Bikini, is because I was like, well, gaming's hot and I love it. Also, like, this will be a great Trojan horse to sort of introduce a bunch of female and non-binary creators to a wider audience and get them this distribution. And also, hey, myself, put a couple of stories by me in there. So, yeah, that's actually a great benefit of anthologies, is giving creators more visibility when they don't have like a whole book that's ready to publish yet. But yeah, I would absolutely love to do more anthologies. I have no idea at this point what that'll be, but I'm hoping that maybe I can do more through Lion Forge, because they've been very supportive of that and wanted to maybe publish more stuff in that direction. But have to wait and see whether inspiration strikes. But at this point, having edited or co-edited 3 times, I can pretty well say that it's a process I enjoy, and I'd really like to do more.
Well, before I jump into Comics for Choice, you mentioned Chainmail Bikini. I remember when that came out. At the time, I was teaching at University of Texas at Dallas in their Arts, Technology, and Emerging Communication program.
Oh, yeah!
I remember telling you when we met at SPX. And I would say the majority of my students in my various classes were in the ATech program because they were interested in some aspect of gaming, whether it be game design or sound engineering or what have you. They were there for, in a larger sense, gaming and wanting to get into the field of gaming. And I specifically told them about Chainmail Bikini just because of its focus, right? The anthology of women gamers. Mm-hmm. And so they were really excited about that. And I was looking for an occasion at one point to perhaps teach that book in a class, but I never got around to that, unfortunately.
Who knows? The time, hopefully, for somebody to be able to teach Chainmail Bikini will come around again. And, yeah, I'm always sort of looking to do comics that have some sort of inherent tie-in with people's other interests, so that then it can sort of expand beyond the relatively small pool of indie comics readership and like give people a reason to pick it up, even if they don't consider themselves a comics fan, or if they're, not necessarily going to pick up any indie art comics anthology. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's get to this new collection and tell me, what are the origins of Comics for Choice?
The origins of Comics for Choice were actually before the election, as you know, like, Trump becoming president is not, like, the only thing that threatens abortion rights. So, like, before the election, I had already been hearing about all of these clinic closures, like states that only have one abortion clinic open, and trap laws, which are the, like, requirements that are targeted to force clinics to close, mandatory waiting periods, just all of these hoops that people have to go through to get abortions. And it just, made me furious, because that's people's bodily autonomy, and, this is something that mostly affects women, especially the most marginalized women have the most trouble getting abortion access. So I was like, this is terrible. What do I do? Like, what's the best use of my time to make a difference on this issue? And my friend OK, who is one of the co-editors of the book, they were like, hey, you're good at organizing zines and organizing anthologies. You should do that and raise money, because they knew that I'd already done Chainmail Bikini. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. That's excellent. Like, of course I should do that. And then, not only is it a way to raise money, but it's a way to, help people, just, like, help educate readers on, like, the whole plethora of reasons that people choose to get abortions, and what barriers maybe are facing them, and the history of abortion and abortion access in America, and just all that, So I was like, this is great. We can create something that is an educational resource, and that, helps people who've had abortions feel seen and understood by, like, providing all of these different viewpoints. Hopefully one of them is going to resonate with somebody. And also, we can sell this book, and it's a way to make money for the National Network of Abortion Funds. Yeah, although I didn't actually decide to do it immediately after OK said this is a great idea. I kind of sat on it for a while, and I talked to Whit Taylor about it, because she has worked in public health, and she's very knowledgeable about that, as well as being an amazing cartoonist and having edited other anthologies. But I put it off because I was like, that's going to be, like, such a burden to fact check and make sure everything's accurate. Like, that's going to be a lot more important with this than it was with Chainmail Bikini, where I don't feel like I have to fact check, like, what happens in Majora's Mask or anything like that. And, also I was nervous about coming in for harassment and all kinds of stuff from anti-choice people and groups, and I felt like, well, I already really put myself out there one time with the Anthology of Women Gamers, and I sort of somehow dodged the Gamergate bullet, and, like, just, it seemed like just the people who wanted and needed that anthology found it, and the people who would be mad about it kind of missed it. So I was like, I don't know if I want to if I want to risk doing another anthology that has another, like, built-in dedicated harassment and hate group that are going to be against it, that, could come after us. But anyway, then the election happened, and of course everybody, including me, were freaking out, terrified, how do we step up, etc. So I just, went to Whit and OK, and I was like, hey, remember this idea that we talked about that you said you would want to help with if I ever did it? Like, let's do it now. Let's go. And, yeah, and so it took about a little less than a year, probably, from that initial idea in November to having the book out in print, which was at first in September, and then it took a little bit longer to get into bookstores and stuff.
Now, this was crowdfunded originally, correct?
Yes, it was. Yeah. We crowdfunded it on Generosity, which is Indiegogo's separate raising money for charity platform. And we did that because Kickstarter actually doesn't allow you to make the claim that you're raising funds for charity. I'm sure they've had some kind of bad experience with that. You know, people misusing that claim. And Generosity also doesn't take a cut, unlike Kickstarter does. So it has a little bit of a less, maybe built-in audience and understanding of it as a platform, but it was perfect for raising money to create a book with all of the proceeds going to charity after printing and shipping costs are paid for. And me and the other editors and all the contributors were good enough to donate their time and creative effort to contribute their work for free, which is, you know, really great work on everybody's part. But I think that there were a lot of people who felt really moved to say, like, what can I do to help protect abortion access? And this sort of provided an avenue where, you know, artists and writers who maybe wouldn't normally be like volunteering as a clinic escort or whatever can offer their creative labor instead. And then it really makes a difference by going to this organization who's directly helping people overcome all those barriers to abortion access that I was just talking about. Like, that's what they do with the money, is they help people pay for their procedures, pay for, you know, travel if the clinic is far, far away, all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that was the fundraising model. And we raised, gosh, I'm a little fuzzy on the numbers now. I think like $19,000 for the National Network of Abortion Funds. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Now, that original campaign on Generosity ran between May and June of last year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then at what point did you begin communicating with Mark Arsenault at Alternative Comics about his role in this? Because Alternative Comics, he distributes this, right?
Yeah, well, so Mark had already been distributing Chainmail Bikini through Alternative Comics, which is a really important avenue for us, because if you have just one book that you publish, you can't get it in the Diamond catalog or in these other book distributor catalogs. So it has to sort of fall under that's got to fall under a larger publisher's umbrella, and that's something that Mark had been doing with a lot of different micro presses and small presses. So we already had that relationship, and so it wasn't too difficult to just be like, hey, can I list this other book that I'm doing under Alternative Comics as well?
And in fact, that's where we discussed Chainmail Bikini. A couple of years ago, we did a show on Alternative Comics and its small press co-op. So we discussed various alternative comic titles along with stuff by Hick and Hawk, Study Group, Floating World, and Press Gang.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it really makes me happy to be in the same section of the catalog as all of those different creators and micro publishers. So that was, I know that this is this is probably the biggest bottleneck for other creators and editors who are publishing their work through Kickstarter and through crowdfunding, is like, you can pretty easily sell, you know, a few thousand copies of a book through a campaign if it catches on, but then there's a whole other audience of like people who would be finding it in bookstores and comic book shops, and you want to reach them. So, I mean, I think that alternative comics is pretty full up as far as the co-op aspect goes, but yeah, more people out there should be creating distribution co-ops to sort of to get through this bottleneck of distribution.
Mm-hmm. So once you, Wit, and OK decided that you wanted to do this anthology, how did you go about finding contributors?
That's a great question. So, for Comics for Choice, we were a little bit less maybe aggressive about inviting people than we were with Chainmail Bikini because, we couldn't say, look, here's how much money you're going to make if the Kickstarter gets funded. So, we didn't want to be too demanding in terms of asking people to donate their time. But the main methods that we got contributors is we did an open call for submissions, and that was both for people who had their own stories to tell, because there's lots of cartoonists who either they've gotten abortions or they have some sort of legal or medical or what have you expertise. Some cartoonists even are clinic escorts. So there's lots of cartoonists who have their own stories to tell with regard to abortion. But, if the pool of writers was just limited to people who've kind of spent their lives learning how to draw real good, that would be very limiting. So we also took submissions for artists who didn't have a particular story that they wanted to tell, but they just wanted to volunteer to maybe illustrate somebody else's thing. So we had this pool of artist volunteers, and then we worked with We Testify, which is this storytelling branch of the National Network of Abortion Funds. It's like a group of storytellers that share their abortion stories online, in videos, in media, in all kinds of different ways. Who, they're kind of a diverse cross-section of the people who seek abortions in America, and they all have, different interesting stories around that. So, because we were already working with the NNAF, then we worked with We Testify and saw, hey, do any of you who are already experienced in sharing your stories want to have a cartoonist illustrate it? So that was a really great avenue to get writers and people who wouldn't normally be sharing their stories in comics form into the anthology. And then the people that we did specifically invite, not to be too presumptuous, but we also specifically invited people who are reproductive justice scholars or historians, like Ricky Solinger, Heidi Williamson, Cynthia Greenlee are some of the people who were able to contribute writing to the. I mean, it's not just prose writing. We were like, hey, we've learned a lot by reading your work in terms of informing how we're editing this anthology. We would love to share some of your knowledge directly, and would you be willing to write something specifically for us and work with a cartoonist to have it become a comic? And almost everybody who we asked that way either said yes, or some of them fell through, but they tried really hard to make it into the anthology, which, just goes to show that anybody who's doing that professionally, it's, because they really deeply care about people's access to abortion and their bodily autonomy, and, I don't know. I think they're all really wonderful people, and that sort of shows in their eagerness to be part of this, even if they're very established, at least in this field, scholars.
Mm-hmm. In fact, one of the things that's so impressive about this collection is the sheer number of contributors that you have. And what, we have over 40 stories or pieces that are collected in this anthology. And one of the things that you and your co-editors point out in your introductions is that you do make clear that you reached out to a variety of different people, not just those within the comics community. You know, as you were just pointing out, you could have professionals, you could have scholars, you could have people, in the medical field working along with an artist to create a particular tale or story. Could be autobiographical, could be fictional. And so I found it interesting that the roster of contributors at the back of the book just seems to go on and on. There's just so many.
Yeah, that's because almost probably more of the stories than not are collaborations than stuff by a sole cartoonist. But, yeah, we kind of wanted, I suppose, to overwhelm people with the, with the, like, just sheer variety of different experiences that people have with abortion and that lead them to want to get an abortion, and like just include as many voices as possible within reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned overwhelming readers, but overwhelming in a good way.
That's certainly what I hope. That's subjective to the reader, but
mm-hmm. No, yeah. As a comics reader, I appreciated this volume because it introduced me to a lot of people that within the comics community that I wasn't aware of. Now, there's some names of your contributors that I did know, like Leah Hayes, Creota Wilberg, Sophia Foster Domino, but the vast majority of the others, I did not know who they were. If I've encountered their work in the past, I may have, but they weren't names that I would readily recognize. And so I think that picking up Comics for Choice is a great way for a reader to introduce him, her, or their self to just a wide swath of creators from different backgrounds, different approaches, different styles of art, different styles of storytelling.
Yeah, me too. And I think that's a good reason also to have an open call for submissions structure. So, especially with Comics for Choice, because we found so many artist volunteers. But for any anthology that I've done, I've always been surprised and delighted by the people who submit to it. Either they have incredible work and I never would have found out about it otherwise, or maybe people who I was already familiar with their work, but I didn't know that this was their a specific area of their interest. Like Sophia actually reached out to me when she heard that we were doing this anthology and asked if she could help. And if it had been by if any of these anthologies had been by invitation only, they would be totally different. So I think that having a widely circulated call for submissions is really, really cool. And, I know that people totally understandably will pick up anthologies with names that they recognize, whose work that they know that they're going to enjoy. But, I'd like to provide a balance of get a reader in the door, so to speak, and then introduce them to new artists, new writers, new ideas.
Well, tell me a little bit about the process of editing, how you worked with both OK and Wit in pulling everything together and then deciding what you would accept, how you would arrange the material, all of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a very complicated and confusing beast, and there were a lot of spreadsheets. It was a much more involved process than Chainmail Bikini, where pretty much I accepted people's pages as they were and only edited them very minimally for spelling and grammar issues. And Comics for Choice was so much more involved. So we got like a raft of story submissions from people who wanted to draw their own stuff, as well as artists who volunteered to potentially draw somebody else's work. All three of us sat down together, looked through the submissions, accepted most of them because most of them are awesome. And this is how you get a 300-page book. But we checked in with people a lot more frequently rather than just waiting to get finished pages from people by a certain deadline. We said, okay, we want either a script or thumbnails, depending on how a particular artist works, and then we will go over that and give you feedback, and then we want final pages, or if you want to show us an interim stage like pencils or something, that's great. But we wanted to make sure that there was something in between hearing what the idea was going to be and getting the final thing, so that we could look at all of these different aspects, and we were all sort of together looking at people's scripts / thumbnails for, what our knowledge of like medical and historical accuracy, general sensitivity, as well as, basic like spelling and storytelling things of how, whether it's functioning as a comic. And another reason it was a lot more in-depth is because we were working with all of these first-time writers, or first-time writers of comics, a lot of whom they'd sort of told their stories in a personal essay form, but, had not, like, written a comic script, and we didn't make them write comic scripts. We just sort of were like, try to write out everything that you want in the comic, and, we'll give this to the artist, and hopefully the artist can have some freedom about how they choose to frame the story or adapt it, like, which of your words they're converting into visuals, sort of, and which they might be retaining as captions or dialogue. And, you send the artist your reference materials to, like, if it's somebody else's personal story, they're probably going to want to have their likeness, I don't know, maybe their mom's likeness, the clinic they went to, whatever they care about being visually accurate. They have to send that reference material to the artist. And there was also a really involved process of pairing writers with artists, where we had, all these writers, like mostly from We Testify, and then a few different activists and scholars and different writers from outside of that. And we had a spreadsheet of, here's all the artists who volunteered with links to their portfolio. And we let the writers kind of lead that process because, a lot of the times it is their very personal story. So, we wanted them to feel really solid about how it was being represented visually. And, of course, the artist has to approve of the match and be into the writer as well. But so we had this whole spreadsheet and then made everybody choose their first, second, and third choice of artist. And then I kind of looked at everything and tried to like just grok the whole thing as to like who's available. And, in some cases, in most cases it was pretty like, okay, this is one of the... I keep saying okay, and I know that's my co-editor's name, but that's not what I mean in this case. All right, who's only your third choice is available and hasn't been claimed by anybody else, so that's who we're going to try to pair you with. Or, you know, in some cases when things are really up in the air, then, you know, it was kind of up to me as to, like, which artist and writer do I think would go together the best, which collaboration do I really want to try to facilitate. So, yeah, that was a whole process, and then, you know, the editors tried to especially help first-time comics writers with maybe editing down what they were sending or deciding what to focus on, like what were the most crucial elements of their story, and as we're doing all this, we're also keeping in mind what are the other stories in the anthology, like what's going to show a unique perspective as opposed to, you know, too strongly echoing somebody else's story. So trying to sort of steer people into somehow showing unique aspects of the whole experience and history and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Well, that actually leads me to another question, and that is, once you and your co-editors had more or less decided what to include, and you had worked with the different writers and artists and getting all those pieces about, what decisions went into the arrangement of everything? Because as I was reading Comics for Choice, it seemed to me not necessarily there was a particular pattern to the arrangement of the stories, but there was some logic to which stories followed which other ones.
Mm-hmm. Well, Wit and OK were kind enough to mostly let me do that because that's my favorite part of editing an anthology, you know, and I sent them a proposal of how I thought the stories should go together. And of course, you got to keep in mind pagination, like some things work better as spreads, some things need page turns in certain places, so there's not total freedom to order everything just by however you would want it, but there's a lot of freedom. So they were kind enough to basically let me do that because it's my favorite part and just say, all right, hey, this order that you put together looks pretty good. And yeah, I kind of think of it as, I mean, it's a little bit similar to making a mixtape or a mix CD or a Spotify mix, I guess, is the modern thing. But I don't know. I tried to generally approach it with starting with like a strong, engaging kind of overview piece. I thought the piece that Kat Fajardo illustrated was like a good kind of hook, and so I put that first, and then sort of went chronologically from like the pre-Roe versus Wade abortion trials and the Jane abortion service that was in the pre-legalization era through, you know, immediately post Roe versus Wade, like when it came to the historical subject matter, and then, I don't know, and then just tried to, like, if you need the knowledge from one story to understand another story, to put those in the appropriate order, and then kind of tried to flow things together by theme, like people's relationship with their moms, or people who maybe already had kids, or people who wanted to have kids, and how that kind of impacted things. And
or the doula stories. Is that how you pronounce that? A doula?
So, yes. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that made sense to, I actually met Mick, who did one of the abortion doula stories at the Feminist Zine Fest for the first time recently. They're super great. They also did a zine called I think like DIY doula, something like that. I'm so sorry, I can't remember it, but about like self-care after your abortion, and like, yeah, it's similar in ethos to Comics for Choice, just way, way, way shorter. And, they actually are the one doing this doula work, so they're informed by that. There's sort of two doula stories, one of which is a little more pausey, and one of which is about like kind of the disappointments and letdowns that somebody has experienced as a doula, with like doctors not being as understanding and supportive as they should be. So yeah, I tried to like, I didn't want anything to be overwhelmingly negative on any particular aspect. Like, obviously some people have a lot of trauma or sadness around their abortion experiences, and that absolutely needs to be talked about, and people, it's important for people to be able to empathize that, and we can't like sweep that under the rug as the pro-choice movement and, say like any expression of sadness around abortion undermines this right, so we can't talk about it. But yeah, I kind of tried to, aside from the chronology, which is more at the front, there wasn't really one like objective order of how things should go, so much as like trying to pair things by theme but not have them be too redundant, and provide things that were sort of emotional complements to one another.
Right. And, there's also a variety of tone and even experience, because as you mentioned, there are a variety of stories in this collection where the people who went through their experiences had a really difficult time either getting the abortion or getting through it, maybe in the days leading up to or after that procedure. On the other hand, there's one story that kind of stuck out for me because the tone seemed to be, I don't want to call it lighter or more upbeat, but the one telling the story didn't seem to have as much difficulties as others had in this collection. This is Mundo Ferpecto by Daniela Diaz and illustrated, I think, by Stephanie Rodriguez. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting in that you were able to balance stories of people who, with their abortion, going through that, had a rough time. On the other hand, there are a couple, like we find in this story, whose exposure to the possibilities and their choices and where they came from, what their background was all about, worked in their favor.
Yeah, it definitely, from the anecdotal evidence or the sampling of just people whose stories are in this book, it seems like people who, were, there's a lot of people who maybe had been reproductive rights activists or things like that before they had an abortion themselves, and in a lot of cases that seemed to sort of prepare people, or like it seems very, very dependent on the support of people around them, people's parents and partners and friends, and like, obviously it makes such a difference whether, somebody is hearing like you're killing our baby or something horrible like that versus, being surrounded by like supportive and understanding people who know what's going on. And yeah, in some cases it's people who were already activists are involved with like Planned Parenthood or something, and then they had an abortion. And in a lot of cases, it's the other way around, and people talk about how their own, experience like motivated them to continue like doing reproductive justice work in the future. Mm-hmm. And it all goes back to, I guess, the beauty of the anthology, that the burden is not on any one person or storyteller to represent the entire breadth of experiences that people have. Like, some people were coming to us and going, is this story too sad? Like, I don't want to paint like abortion rights in any kind of bad light, but it was a very difficult experience for me, which seems to usually be, I think that is more caused by cultural stigma than the other way around,
which you make clear in this collection.
Well, that's credit to the writers and artists, all of whom, even if they were like, I had a terrible time, they want everybody to still be able to access abortion if they want it and not have a terrible time. Mm-hmm. But, some people were worried about whether their stories were sad and contributed to stigma around abortion, and were like, no, like, some of these stories are sad, but don't worry about it, because, like, it's going to be presented in this, really broad context. And, again, it's important to talk about, like, from a perspective of, like, what makes some people's experiences harder? Like, why? How can we help people? And, I think
lack of funds.
Right. Lack of funds.
Socioeconomic position.
Lack of
yes.
access. Yeah, exactly. And, for other people who have had a tough time to read it and feel empathized with. So, I love the stories that, are more from the angle of, like, oh, I found this very empowering to have this full control over my body, or are able to, like, wring humor out of certain aspects of the situation. But, it's a full complement. It's an emotional spectrum.
Right. Now, one of the things that you mentioned toward the beginning of our interview, when I was asking you about this project's genesis, there was a lot going on with abortion rights before the 2016 election. But the 2016 election kind of put some urgency under your feet, so to speak. And I'm curious, was there any point when you and your co-editors were pulling everything together, if you wondered, well, there may be such a thing as being too political with either individual stories or the collection as the whole? Did that go into any of the decisions that you and your co-editors made?
I can't really say that it did. We were definitely thinking about timeliness and posterity, but that didn't really change, like, which comics that we wanted to include. It's just around, like, the framing of certain comics. Like, it's not the same as, like, a comic that's going online in a certain moment. Like, you can't say the current president, because we want this book to be on bookshelves for years to come, and, God willing, outlast Trump. Like, you gotta say President Trump, or other things that, make it not. We certainly wanted to be relevant about, like, most of these were written some of them were written before Trump was even sworn in or right after he was sworn in, so we didn't know how things were going to play out, but of course people wanted to talk about, what does this mean to have such an anti-choice president in the White House who, wants to...
who said he wanted to criminalize women.
Supreme Court that'll overturn Roe versus Wade, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I don't think there is really something of too political or too contemporary. We just wanted to make sure that the way things were worded would make sense, when things are read now in 2018 or years from now.
Okay. So now sales to the book continue to go to the National Network of Abortion Funds. Is that correct?
That's not correct, actually. So the sales from the Indigo or Generosity campaign, all of those were donated to the National Network of Abortion Funds, bulk donation after printing costs and shipping costs and stuff like that. And the National Network of Abortion Funds does have copies of the book in their web store if people want to buy it and support them. But sales going forward, through conventions, bookstores, etc., that money is split between me and the other editors and contributors. And I actually paid everybody their royalties in advance, assuming that I would sell through the print run because I didn't want to have to deal with keeping track of sales. But yeah, it's an even split of profits between all 70 or however many there are of us.
Well, it's a great collection. It's a very diverse collection, Comics for Choice, and I recommend everyone check this out. So, Hazel, I want to thank you for coming on the Comics Alternative and talking about this anthology. And given your relatively recent history with anthologies, I look forward to having you on in the not-so-distant future to talk about your next anthology.
Thank you so much. I would love to come back for anthologies or personal work, and thank you for all the great, incisive questions. I really appreciate your interest in the book.
Again, I want to thank Hazel for coming on the Comics Alternative to discuss Comics for Choice and for sharing their experiences as a comics editor. And if you want to find great books like the ones I discussed with Hazel, then you would do well to head on over to the website of our sponsor, Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com right now, and there you'll find a variety of titles at unbeatable prices. That's dcbservice.com. And after you do get your titles there, get in touch with me and let me know what you thought about my conversation with Hazel Newlevant. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up your phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427. You can also email us. We're 2guys@comicsalternative.com, or you can email me directly. I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com. And you can find us all over social media. We have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, YouTube, Slack, and Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on Spotify, on TuneIn, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, comicsalternative.com. We'll be back later with more interviews, so look forward to those. Until then, take care.